So we are back. Um, yeah, so let's let's just uh, write about. So essentially, what this says is a fool might want himself alone expose. So maybe he's talking about like a bad writer, right? Now, one in verse makes many more in prose. Like maybe the bad writer might expose himself once, but showing, having one bad writer out there, or one, writer that writes a bad story is going to create many more in prose, is going to sort of inspire many more bad critics, because critics write in prose, right? um, but I'm not 100% sure on that, and it's a little bit vague. I feel like my argument might be a little bit vague. Like I kind of know what it's saying, but I'm not 100% certain like this is exactly what it means. And what I like to do is I'm all about clarity, guys. I think it's so important that, especially when you're dealing with communication and writing, that you're super clear on exactly what this word means, this line means, this stanza means. Otherwise, don't put it in your essay if you're not 100% sure what it means, because once you get into the meat of writing the essay, you're not going to be as confident, because you're going to say, well, I kind of know what this means. I kind of think I know what this means. Or like, go ask. But there's plenty here in this first stanza. I don't need to talk about every single word and every single line. Like, we basically picked most of this first stanza. That's plenty. And there's a lot of meat here that I think we could talk about. And it supports our thesis, right? He's talking more smack about the critic than the author. He immediately in the first stanza says it's less, the offense is less dangerous to the reader, to people in general, the writer that tires our patience, like bad writing, than misleading our sense, than a bad critic, essentially. So I'm pretty sure that's the structure, and that's what he's talking about. Um, and here, there's 10 bad critics for every one bad writer, or there's 10 bad critiques or reviews for one bad book. And that's fine, because that defends our thesis, and then we can move on and go find more meaty quotes. You don't have to. You get to play. I don't want to say play God, but you essentially get to call the shots. I mean, you can craft. That's what's so great about essay writing. You can craft the story, and believe me, even kids that go to amazing schools. Yeah, there are some geniuses out there that just understand every single word, and they're just amazing. But even I didn't understand every little word in every little poem, because a lot of these, they're so rich. You have to like read it a bunch of times, and there's all these names in it. We'll go over that as well. Like, and you have to look up, go look up the names and see. These are called allusions, with an Allusions, right? They're alluding to these different poems and different poets and different heroes and different books, and so you can go look all of them up. I'm sure the teacher's going to talk about them. I'm sure if you guys have a discussion, you'll talk about them a little bit. I'm sure if you've got like classmates that you study with, you'll talk, but you're not going to like know every single one. I mean, the odds are super low that you're going to know every single one. But I want to give you guys the confidence to be able to say, you know what? I can still be a competitive student in history class, in literature class. Like whatever the material is, I want to be able to help you guys, to give you guys confidence, even if you don't know every single word. It's very different than math. In math, you essentially need to know all of, like, a lot, if not close to all of these rules, these theorems, and these rules and these postulates. To be able to get all the questions right. Well, English is a little bit different. History is a little bit different. You can argue your way into an A. You can sort of hide your flaws and put forth your strongest effort of stuff that you really, really know and you really, really get, and the stuff that you want to focus on. So, anyways, okay. So let's just all walk you through this. So let's just do exactly what we did in the last essay. So this is our third essay that we're doing. So okay. Just with our judgments as our watches, none go just alike, right? So none of the second hands that tick, 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 they don't move exactly the same. Each believes his own, in poets as true geniuses, but rare, true taste as seldom is the critic's share. Both must alike from heaven derive their light. So let's talk about that. Both. So he concedes both, that both must alike from heaven. Here he's talking about derive their light. So this I take to mean the critic and the author both must be inspired, by God or by, the heavens above, to be to be awesome, to be really superlative, and that makes sense to me. That makes total sense. These born to judge as well as those to write. Okay, so born to judge meaning if you're born to be a critic, or you're born to be a writer. Let such teach others who themselves excel. Let such teach others who themselves excel, who themselves do well, and censure freely. And the critic would talk smack freely, who have written well. Authors are partial, so I know kind of what that means. And but the last two lines are extremely clear to me. Exactly what they're saying. Authors are partial to their wit, 'tis true. So authors are partial to their wit, right? So we're all biased. So we all think, we're good. Like, I mean, not all of us, but what Alexander Pope is saying is that authors think they're good, right? Like, basically, that's what he's saying. Authors are partial to their wit, 'tis true. But our critics are not critics to their judgment, too. So authors think they're good. Probably, if they keep writing, they probably think they're pretty good. If they keep submitting manuscripts to their editors and keep, publishing books, they must think they're at least decent, right? But critics that keep writing, like Pauline Kael used to be a great critic of movies, back in the day, and Andrew Sarris and all these guys. These guys were like considered the greats of like film criticism, for example. And they just kept like making stuff. They just kept writing reviews, and they obviously thought they were good if they keep writing. So that's essentially what he's saying. It makes sense to me. It's very, very clear what he's saying. So I like only putting quotes in that I'm super confident, like not 80% confident, but 100% confident exactly what the author's saying. And we can just write all this stuff out, and then if we don't have enough meat here, if we don't have enough quotes, then we go out and we ask questions. We make sure that we understand what more of these lines mean, exactly what they mean. Because then you can argue it. If you don't know exactly what the lines mean, you can't really argue it. You can kind of argue it, but it's easily getting lost. So I think step one is only pulling out quotes that you truly understand. Okay, so authors are partial to their wit, 'tis true, but are not critics to their judgment too. So that makes sense to me. And then, so he's saying yes, authors are biased and think they're good, but critics are biased as well and think they're good as well. Not letting the critic off the hook. So, and the fact that he says, that he says the authors first, but then he also mentions the critics last, that emphasizes that he's talking a little bit more smack about the critic. He's criticizing. That's probably the language we'll use in the real thesis. Criticizing the critic, perhaps more, concedes more, or like grants more positivity, right? Concedes more to the author and more support to the actual author. Yet if we look more closely, we shall find most of the seeds of judgment in their mind. So most of these critics are already thinking about judging in a negative way. So he's making this blanket statement. If we look more closely, we shall find most have the seeds of judgment in their mind. All right, so critics usually, right, because most of them, he's saying, critics usually are already biased towards writing negative reviews about, books, material, poems, etc. So this is what he's saying. He's talking smack, and again, it adds to our thesis, right? I'd rather have a more simple thesis, not basic, not a bad thesis, but I mean an easier to argue thesis, something that's sort of obvious. Like here, saying that Pope's analysis is that of talking smack. It's not quite as nuanced. Like what we're going to talk about is not, our thesis is not going to be quite as nuanced, but be able to argue it extremely well. Then try to go for broke and argue some really difficult, thorough, overly nuanced, or really hard to argue thesis, and then not have a lot of material. I'd rather use a lot of rich material. I'd rather, so I'm all about the solid base hit, especially when you're talking about poetry. You want to, yeah. So this is a good start, and we'll attack some more of these lines and explication in the